Hi, I don't know if I'm going to be sharing this with the masses or not, or if this is simply going to be a video diary for myself, because I know my memory is awful, and if I don't get it out, it will fade and disappear. So, life has been really difficult, and try not to get upset. Today, 4 weeks ago today, my mom passed away, and we all knew it was coming, but I guess naively, I didn't really put much thought into the end actually coming, and I thought, she just had, I thought she would have more time, but it did start with a hospital visit and then ended with hospice. I guess I should do a little bit of a background for what happened to my mom, so I don't ever forget about it. So back in, guess I should start from the beginning. So she was diagnosed with cancer in December 22nd, 2023, 12 days after my birthday. She had been showing some symptoms starting around my birthday. They were mainly, she was having a lot of bloating and fatigue, but it was mostly her stomach was just, she almost looked pregnant. And she was the kind of person that, and I think I got this from her, unfortunately, is, if my arm was cut off, I would probably be like, don't look, nothing's happening, everything's fine, and go run in a corner and hide. So she was really great at, pretending that things weren't happening. So during that time, I was renovating some of her house because she had just gotten her husband, my stepdad, into a nursing home after being his caretaker for over 2 years with dementia. Those 2 years were filled with so many awful stories. She went through so much that most people will never experience. But she finally got him into a pretty decent nursing home where they would take care of him. And, the doctor from the VA said that he needed to be somewhere 24/7 to get proper care. I thought he should have been in the nursing home a long time ago, but whatever. He finally got in the last week of November 2023. My mom and I took him along with her neighbor and got him settled in. And, it didn't seem to faze him. And he's still there to this day. So my mom only had true freedom for about a month. Not even a month, because she started feeling unwell. Maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks of true freedom pretty much in her entire life. And then she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And the kind of cancer she was diagnosed with often resembles the same symptoms as ovarian cancer, and they treat it the same way. Well, the reason why her stomach looked so enlarged is because she had a buildup of fluid, which is called ascites. And when she went to the doctor, they took some of that fluid out, I think several liters of fluid off of her stomach, and they sent that to be tested. Well, it came back as malignant for adenocarcinoma, which, from my understanding, it means that adeno is It has to deal with your glands, and carcinomatosis is just, it's in more, I don't really know. I'm still a little confused about carcinomatosis. Anyway, terminal cancer, primary peritoneal carcinomatosis, which is very rare. If you Google it, 1 in a million. Not many people get it, but again, it's treated pretty much like ovarian cancer because it has to deal with epithelial cells, and I don't know. So, diagnosed December 22nd, moved in with us December 23rd. I immediately started converting our dining room into a bedroom, and I think she had a pretty nice setup during her frontline treatment where she stayed with us, you know, full time. She had her bedroom in our dining room, and she also had her cat Joey with her as well. So the first treatment is it was your traditional frontline of carboplatin and Taxotere. They also added in Avastin, I think the second or third dose. She did pretty well with chemo, at least the front line. She had minimal side effects. She did feel tired. Tiredness was probably her biggest issue throughout her whole 20 months of dealing with cancer. But you know, she didn't have the nausea like a lot of people do, or pain, at least during that frontline treatment, which is generally about 6 months. It's 6 cycles every 4 weeks. So we were able to get her through that, and, you know, with not a lot of issues. And they did CT scans every 2 or 3 months to see how things were going. And mostly they showed stability. It didn't show that things were shrinking, but stability is sometimes all you can hope for, especially with terminal cancer. So she was stable. And traditionally with ovarian cancer / primary peritoneal cancer, you do go through a surgery with your gynecologic oncologist where they do a hysterectomy and they do what's called a debulking surgery, where they can go in laparoscopically or make an incision, and they take out all the cancer that they can see. She was scheduled to have that July 3rd. So we brought her to the hospital. They got her all set up to go through surgery. I was a wreck, of course. Kristen was there with me. We were in the waiting room, and shortly after, I mean, we hadn't been in the waiting room for that long, we got notified that her doctor wanted to see us, and I immediately thought the worst. I thought something went horribly wrong, which in a way it kind of did. So we went to a private room with her oncologist, and he explained that when he went inside to do the surgery, he saw what's called miliary spread of the carcinomatosis. And what that means is it's like powdered sugar from a donut, or, you know, sesame seeds from a sesame seed bagel. It's just the cancer is sprinkled all over. That you cannot surgically remove that, unfortunately. She also had a frozen pelvis, which her doctor didn't think too much about, so I didn't think too much about that either. Anyway, the surgery was stopped, and, you know, most of the time that surgery is what really helps people get through this kind of cancer. Or, I failed to mention, when they tested her ascites fluid, they tested it for genetic, if she had any genetic predispositions to this as well, and she did not, which, you know, is good news for me, bad news for her, because a lot of the treatment is immunotherapy, which is, you know, if you are HRD positive, HER2 positive, BRCA1, BRCA2, all that. there are more treatments for people that have genetic predispositions, and she did not. So after the surgery, we were told that she had 6 months to live if she didn't do anything, and 1 to 2 years with treatment, and treatment would be chemo. So of course we chose chemo. And again, this was July 2024, so a little over a year ago. She took a break, I think it was 2 months from chemo, and she actually had a really good 2 months. She felt great. I don't want to say great. She had a lot of energy. She had a lot of hope. She was a lot more positive. She was living back on her own. Things were looking up. But you have to make a choice whether you want to do treatment or not. And we all thought treatment was going to be the way, especially after reading other people's stories that have been through this. Some people, it's called maintenance chemo, where you have chemo every month just to maintain your stable cancer. So we were hopeful, but so she started the next chemo, which was Doxil, which is one of the harshest chemo agents. So of course we were nervous about it and immediately thought the worst, but it really wasn't that bad, at least for the first many infusions. And she had a lot. I think she got up to 13. I would say the first 9 were pretty, I don't want to say uneventful too, because she did have a hospital visit back in, December 2024. She had a small bowel blockage, which is very common in her situation because oftentimes the cancer will push on a bowel and cause an obstruction. But sometimes that can clear and sometimes that cannot. But in December of 2024, she was in the hospital for a week and a half with an NG tube, which goes through your nose and into your stomach and decompresses your stomach so you can get proper bowel rest. And a lot of times that's all you need to clear a blockage is bowel rest. Unfortunately, that first time, even though the NG tube is straight from hell, it's awful, it worked. So she was able to go home. She went on a low residue, low fiber diet, which is pretty much a little kid's diet, lots of white bread, lots of processed food. But it was just something that she had to do. So we were very militant about the low residue diet. So she started that in December 2024. I feel like after that hospital visit, something changed in her. And I think she was legitimately depressed. And she had gone through, certain levels of depression throughout the cancer journey. I don't know what else to call it. But after that blockage, I truly think she was severely depressed. And we all saw it. We would have her over every Sunday to spend the day with us. We would hang out and make dinner, and then she would go home. And those visits we had been doing since July 2024, every Sunday pretty much, unless somebody was sick or not, something came up. But those visits, starting after that first blockage hospital visit, there was just something off. She barely spoke to us. She just seemed so sad, so depressed, just so lost. For those of you that know me, I am a big believer in motivational speeches. I've given so many. And I gave so many to her, more than anybody I've ever known. I got to the point where I was spent. I was giving her these motivational talks, reasonable motivational talks, constantly trying to help her to see some sort of light. But at the same time, I knew that her situation was it was terminal, and it was hard to accept, and I can't imagine what it must feel like. You know, I was in it with her, but it wasn't me. I still can't imagine what that feels like. So I can't blame her getting depressed and, you know, just being sad. Anyway, so January until mid-July, she was depressed, severely depressed. And I think the Doxil was starting to not work along with that. So she was getting more and more tired, lots of fatigue. And I'm not just talking being tired, I'm talking cancer fatigue, which is different. I don't even really understand it. I never had cancer, but I saw it. The fatigue is real, and everybody who has cancer, I think, has it. It's awful. So depressed, she had depression, she was fatigued, and she started throwing up randomly. And we would try to track it down to figure out like what happened. Was it something she ate? What was it? Was it the chemo? Was it an after effect? We kept trying to figure out what was causing it, but we were never certain. She was also having a lot of heartburn, which can cause nausea and vomiting. But the heartburn, I should have mentioned the ascites had come back after the first chemo treatment, and she was having to get what's called a paracentesis probably every month, where they were taking fluids out of her stomach to alleviate that pain. And when there was a lot of ascites, it caused a lot of heartburn. And it was, I mean, I could see it in her face, how painful that heartburn was. I don't think it was just typical heartburn. I think it was pretty awful. So those last few months were they were bad. And then mid-July, I had been saying, ever since she went back to live on her own, we would say good morning and good night every day to each other via Facebook Messenger. And one morning in mid-July, I said good morning, and I sent her a cat picture or something. And she said, good morning. I'm not feeling too well today. And she said that she had thrown up the night before and her stomach was very painful. So, and I asked her, do you think you need to go see the doctor? She said, I don't know. And I said, maybe we should consider going to the ER, because she was saying that her pain was pretty bad. So I said, let me take a shower and I'll come over and we'll go to the ER. So when I got there, on my way there, she sent me a message. She's like, the pain's not as bad anymore. I don't know if we need to go to the ER. And I'm like, I'm still gonna come. So when I got there, she was like, the pain is back. She could barely stand. She was sitting in a recliner. And I could see things were not going to be okay. She was in so much pain. I almost thought about calling an ambulance just so that they could get there earlier. But ultimately, I helped her get into my truck and I took her to UT Hospital. They took her back right away, thank goodness. They wheeled her in in a wheelchair while I parked the truck, and I came in and she had already been taken back, thank goodness, because there was a time before where we went to the ER and we had to leave because it was a madhouse, and it was, anyway, I'm getting off track. So they took her back and I finally got to reunite with her back in the ER room, and they admitted her because they thought that it was a small bowel blockage again, and she needed to go through the bowel rest and the NG tube to try to clear it. So she was admitted, and trying to remember everything that happened. She continued to vomit. It was so bad to see. It wasn't just throwing up, it was projectile, painful, just horrible, horrible vomiting. And it was because of the blockage. And I was there for most of it. Seeing her throw up like that was traumatic, and you know, some of it was like a dark color. That is not a good sign if you Google it. So ultimately they decided that she needed the NG tube, that the simple bowel rest and not drinking, not eating was not working. So they did the NG tube and it brought some relief, but she couldn't eat. An NG tube immediately, even if it's not continuous, she's not getting nutrients. They would clamp it and let her eat, but she would get nauseous again and she would throw up. So she needed that NG tube no matter what. And what that meant was there's no way she could get nutrients because what went in came out, whether that was throwing up or the NG tube taking it out. She also had been on bowel rest before we even went to the ER, and she had been doing that for days. So by the time she was in the hospital, she had already not eaten for days. And then as time went by in the hospital, she still wasn't eating, and she was only taking small sips of water. The oncologist said, you know, they said the word hospice, and I was like, nah, what the fuck, no. I was in denial. I thought surely there was a way to fix her. There wasn't. The oncologist said the only way she could get over this was more chemo. And if you can't eat, if you can't get nutrients, you cannot do chemo, which makes sense. So they started talking about hospice and palliative care. Palliative care pretty much made it sound like hospice is the way to go. And everybody knew there wasn't anything we could do. She couldn't get a stent. They couldn't do surgery. She couldn't eat. So we all made the decision, go on hospice. And at first, I think this was even before the NG tube, or maybe I just wasn't thinking clearly. I wanted to do hospice at home, at my house. But as her needs progressed, and I realized there's no way that we could take care of her properly, it was frightening to figure out how to take care of your mom or anybody that has such high needs just to be comfortable. So the hospice person at UT recommended a hospice house called Sacred Grounds, and they're up in, I think it's the Powell area. At first I was hesitant because they're faith-based. So, but I agreed to go do a tour. Kristen and I took the tour. The place was fabulous. It felt like a home. It was clean. It was just a lovely place, and the people there were lovely as well. Nobody said anything about faith. At this point, it didn't even really matter. So I went back to my mom and told her that we visited, and the place was really nice. Really expensive, but really nice. We didn't care about the money. We just wanted her to be comfortable. So she agreed. And after a week and a half at UT Hospital, she was transported to Sacred Ground Hospice House via an ambulance. And it was mainly because of the NG tube. The NG tube requires a lot of care. So the first night there was horrible. The NG tube caused all kinds of issues. Their NG tube unit wasn't working properly. She threw up more. She got anxious. She was scared. First night was awful. And the nurses at the hospice house, they usually, they've never done an NG tube. It's usually, with my mom's situation, it's rare that somebody on hospice has an NG tube. Because most of the time they're used for feeding. Hers was not. Hers was needed just to be stable. But the next day, thank goodness, things were better. The NG tube was situated. The nurses became very familiar with how to run things. Everything was better. And so for the next, it was really hard to see my mom this way. She hadn't eaten at that point in, weeks. And she was slowly slipping away physically. Her face was sinking in. Her arms were so skinny. Most of the time her legs were under a blanket, but one time I saw her legs and it just, it was heartbreaking. She was losing so much weight. She just didn't look like herself. Looked like a starving person. So hospice, me, Kristen, my brother, Lindsay, Kristen's parents, we all tried to visit her as often as possible. I was there every day, sometimes twice a day. We got a death doula. Her name was Amber, who was amazing. She was also a masseuse, so my mom discovered her love of massages too late. But we got her one every other day for as long as she was there. She was in the hospice house for 22 and a half days. We tried to have conversations. We tried to make memories. We did everything we thought we should do. Nobody prepares you for this. There's no guidebook. I kept asking, are you comfortable? Is everybody being nice to you? Are you in pain? Are you okay? You're gonna be okay. Kept having to remind her that she was gonna be okay. She was scared. There isn't really anything you can say to somebody in that situation to make them feel 100% better. I said the things that I thought would help bring some kind of comfort and peace, but there's only so much you can say. So she started having pain in her back. She called it discomfort. She's just like, or I'm just like her. We have a very high tolerance for pain. Everyone else knew it was pain. She called it discomfort. But we knew that she only had so much time. Her oncologist said days to weeks, when initially it was weeks to months. So we wanted her to be comfortable. We didn't want her last days to be spent in a bed in pain. So the nurses suggested, and the doctors suggested, start her on morphine as well as Ativan to help with the anxiety and just all the mental anguish that comes with something so awful as this. They started the morphine and the Ativan. They called it the morphine dose a baby dose. It wasn't a lot. It was just enough to take the edge off of that discomfort in her back. And it worked for a certain amount of time. But the pain kept coming even when she was on morphine. So they had to increase the morphine. And they increased the Ativan too. She got a little bit agitated at one point. We didn't want her to be agitated. We didn't want her to be in pain. So they kept up the morphine and Ativan, increasing it as needed. Probably the last week she was there, well, up until that last week, we were having conversations. I could make her laugh. We would look at things that I found at her house, like a book that she had filled out about her life. I went there one night and I read it. I read the whole book to her. And she appreciated that, and she added little tidbits as I read it. So we had a lot of good time to talk and to reminisce. She was defying the odds. The nurses and the doctors were so stunned and surprised that somebody could go so long without eating. Most people don't last this long. Most people could go a week or two. She was going almost 30 days without eating. So the last week that she was there, I started seeing her slip away. And I think it was a mixture of the medications, but also her body just giving up, letting go. She started sleeping more. She wasn't as interactive. She started not being able to see my messages that I would send her in the morning, so I just stopped. I would call her instead, but sometimes it hurt too much to hear her on the other side when she could barely talk. Her voice, I guess the muscles in her were just so weak, and I feel like her voice was the first thing to start to go. I didn't want to make her talk more than she needed to talk. But I came every morning to see her, and every day she just looked more and more frail, more and more just almost skeletal. This is cancer. This is what cancer can do to you. I had to remind myself so many times what was going on. I had so much denial. So the day before she passed away, which was the 22nd of August, Kristen and I went to visit her in the morning. She was barely aware, but we were there. And then my brother and Lindsay came, so Kristen and I left to go get lunch. And while we were having lunch, for some reason I decided to have 2 martinis. So I had some sliders and 2 lavender martinis. As soon as I was done with that last martini, my phone rang. It was the hospice house. I had just drank 2 martinis and I was already emotional. So I asked Kristen if she could answer, and she did. They told her that my mom didn't have much time left and that if we wanted to see her, we should come back before they gave her more of her comfort meds. So of course, we head back. It's so weird to think that I was very tipsy at the same time that I found out this news. I don't know. It was just bad timing. On the way there, Kristen was driving and I was laughing and crying at the same time after finding out that news. I felt like I was losing my mind. And so we get there, and I assumed that, she was close to the end, and I hugged her. Well, longest hug I've ever gave her. And I always tended to hug her stomach when she was laying down. So I put my head on her stomach for the longest time and just cried and kept saying, "It's gonna be okay." And I felt her hand go on my head. To try to comfort me. And it worked. She was still aware enough to try to comfort me. I kept my head there for the longest time. My heart was shattered. So Kristen and I were there. My Aunt Marty also came over and was there. We thought that it would all be over soon, but she kept going. She kept defying the odds. And by that time it was like 7 o'clock, and Kristen and I had to go home because of children, and since we all thought that she was going to be around longer, I went home. Kristen went home. My aunt went home shortly after we left. We all went to bed. I waited for that call all night. I didn't sleep. I don't know why I didn't stay there. I wish I could go back in time. I would have stayed the night, but I didn't. But I laid awake in my own bed, waiting for that call that never came. And then at 6 a.m., I called the hospice house to check on her. Nobody answered. So then I waited till 7 a.m. and somebody answered, and I asked how she was doing, and they said that she was the same as she had been, still unresponsive. They also mentioned they had to remove more of her fluid than usual. I don't know what that was about. So that was 7 o'clock that I got off the phone with the nurse. And for some reason, I decided to run some errands before I went to visit. I went to Kroger to pick up my refill for my Xanax, which I had been needing through that. And I decided to go to Rockford and get her mail. And while I was doing that, my brother texted me and said that I'm more than welcome to come hang out with their kittens at the clinic if I needed some kitten time for myself. I went back and forth in my head. Should I go? Should I go see the kittens? Should I go try to get some relief? Try to find some joy in a very dark time? Or should I go right to see my mom? I decided to go see the kittens. I regret that decision. It is what it is, though. I went there and I was playing with kittens. And then I was getting ready to leave to go see my mom, and my phone rang. It was the hospice house. My heart sank. I knew what that call was. I answered. It was Patricia, the nurse. My least favorite nurse. Anyway, she said, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but your mom just passed away." My heart sank even further. I got off the phone and bawled my eyes out. I was there with my brother and my sister-in-law, Lindsay. I went outside and I lost it. What else does one do in that situation? Cried for a while. And tried to absorb what just happened. I'm still trying to absorb what happened. It is now 4 weeks since that day. 4 weeks since August 23rd. And I'm still reeling. I'm still crying every day. Sometimes multiple times a day. Grief is hard. It's confusing. One second you're fine. The next second you're not. And trying to get through this, to accept what happened. I'm not trying to get over it. I'm trying to adapt to this new life without my mom, my #1 fan. My one constant in my life is now just a memory. It's hard. I don't have all the answers. I feel like a different person. I don't know if it's a better version of me or a worse version of me. That's still to be determined. But I'm trying to carry on. And I'm gonna leave it at that. This was 43 minutes of me talking, which is entirely too much. I'm gonna continue documenting my journey through all of this and record myself, because otherwise, like I said at the beginning, if I don't, those memories, those thoughts will fade and they will disappear. So with that, thank you for listening, whoever you are. Maybe myself, maybe my future self is listening to this. I hope you're okay. That is all.